recording material. Good evening to everybody.
Good evening. Good evening, ma'am.
I think time is up. We should start. See, we have been discussing for the last 4 5 classes about the theories of criminology. Now, this is little wide subject. There are different schools of thought regarding the criminal behavior. So that is the reason why I am allotting more time for this. Maybe another couple of classes. I am hopeful that I'll be able to complete that. So now so far we have discussed about different preliminary kind of or fundamental schools of thought, and also as the theories advanced, we also try to discuss about classical, neoclassical, then pre-classical. Then we said there are some biological factors also, and then what are those biological factors, and then does family has a role to play in shaping the character or behavior of a person. Then what is the influence of the peer group. Then we talked about the body shapes, and then we also talked about how the shape of the brain and then shape of the face, how it can also be related to the criminal behavior. So these kind of biological factors we try to understand. Now for today's class I intend to discuss about the other important biological factors like neurotransmitters, then hormones are there, and then we have auto systems, nervous system, autonomous nervous systems are also in place. तो हो सके तो psychoanalytical theory of Sigmund Freud also will try to discuss, but let us see. Now neurotransmitters, as all of you know, as students of biology, probably some people have the background of biology also. So I anticipate that most of you know about what neurotransmitters are. As the name implies, neuro means something related to the nerves and brain. Transmitter means they help in transmitting. What is that which is getting transmitted? It is the information. Information gets processed in the brain, and then information as received from eyes, as received from nose, different organs are there. So information keep reaching the brain through the media of neurotransmitters. So that means lot of information, electrical, in the form of electrical impulse, keeps on getting fed to the brain, and then this is the basis for information. Brain is the basis for information processing. So the criminologists who propound this particular theory of criminology, they strongly believe that there is some underlying antisocial behavior also, whether that can be related to the level of the neurotransmitters. So they are all chemicals. Neurotransmitters are basically chemicals that allow the transmission of electrical impulse. So that means behavior is also a kind of a trait which is related to the brain and then the behavior. So they thought that neurotransmitters, which are chemicals otherwise, which are responsible for the electrical transmission, and thereby it allows the brain to process the information. Now, what is the relationship between the level of neurotransmitters and then the behavior? So a couple of criminologists are very famous for propounding this theory. See, they are Scarbo and then Rainey. These are the two criminologists who try to establish a kind of a relationship between the level of neurotransmitter and then behavior. What do you mean by this? So whether there is any correlation, if suppose a particular neurotransmitter is produced in low amount, does it affect the criminal behavior, or maybe one of the chemicals that are responsible for processing the information, if it is in a higher concentration, does it actually affect the behavior of the person? So this kind of a correlation or relationship they wanted to study, and then they wanted to establish this. So what they found is, antisocial behavior is very frequently observed whenever there is a low level of serotonin than normal people. So a study has been made, the control being the normal people, and the other ones have the history of antisocial behavior. So they try to study, they try to estimate what is the level of the neurotransmitter. One of the neurotransmitters that are profusely being studied is called serotonin, serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical, otherwise a neurotransmitter, which helps the brain in processing the information. So the study revealed that this particular serotonin, which is responsible for information processing, when compared between the normal people and people who had the history of antisocial element, they said there is a correlation for that. That means whenever there is a low level of serotonin that is observed, that has got a direct correlation with the antisocial behavior. That means this antisocial or aggressive behavior, as it is called, so can be augmented by serotonin therapy. Serotonin therapy, especially people who are aggressive, people who have this neuro-related problems, in order to tranquilize them, so a serotonin therapy can be adopted. So that means there is definitely a correlation between antisocial behavior and in those people, the levels of serotonin, which is one of the very crucial chemicals that allow the processing of, or rather transmission of the electrical impulse for brain, is found to be at a very low level. So that means low level of serotonin is definitely a causative factor for the antisocial behavior, is what is being established by Scarbo and then Rainey. These are the two criminologists who propounded this theory of neurotransmitters. And of course, there is another norepinephrine kind of a chemical that is also being produced and then helps in transmission of the information. So when they try to see this effect of this particular neurotransmitter on antisocial behavior, they found that alcohol along with this norepinephrine are also, to some extent, they also hamper the, or they also promote somebody for an antisocial behavior. Now, they also said that genetic defect of two important neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. These two are, there are almost 2-3 chemicals, neurotransmitters, which are responsible for the processing of the information. So what they found as a third element is, whenever there is, because of some genetic effect, if the production of very important, two important neurotransmitters, namely dopamine and serotonin, they said the violent behavior is identified in such people. That means people who have the genetic defect. And what is the genetic defect in them? Very important neurotransmitters, two very important transmitters like dopamine and serotonin. Serotonin and dopamine levels, if they try to observe, then identified in violent individuals and then excessive compulsive behavior. These two behaviors are present in the people who have this genetic defect of in producing the neurotransmitters, namely dopamine and then serotonin. So this is about neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are nothing but they are a kind of chemicals which get secreted and which help in processing brain, which aid in information processing by the brain. So people, criminologists, out of interest, they try to establish a relationship by experimenting. That is, what is the group, normal group versus people with known antisocial behavior. They try to have a comparative study and try to measure the levels of these neurotransmitters and then try to correlate that with the antisocial behavior because he has that tendency. Now, along with serotonin. Serotonin is one of the, as I said, neurotransmitter. Of course, there are dopamine and norepinephrine also, but this is the major one. And in one such experiment, when they try to correlate the levels of serotonin in both normal as well as antisocial people, so they found that there is a considerably low level of serotonin that is been observed. So that means low levels of serotonin can be augmented, they can be enhanced, they can be given outwardly, these serotonin, and try to monitor whether that will be able to control the antisocial element. That's the spirit behind. And then when they did that, otherwise even people who are agitated or people who have this kind of a aggression mental problem, so they were given these levels of serotonin so that whatever condition they are suffering from, that can be reversed, is another kind of a known fact. So by putting all facts together and then trying to correlate, they said definitely there is a relationship that exists between the levels of neurotransmitters and of course behavior. And we also know that alcohol also has a, because any chemical that affects the central nervous system, including the brain, will definitely change somebody's behavior. We know that social drinking at one level, people are normal. As the dosage increases, we know there is a behavioral change in the person who is otherwise very taciturn will become talkative, and then all his inner desires and then inner beliefs and all, they come out, and then they take people into confidence, they lose inhibition. So we know about alcohol anyway. But apart from that, there are other chemicals called neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, and then the dopamine. These are also some of the neurotransmitters which have some kind of an effect on the behavior of the antisocial behavior of the person. So and genetic defect also, in another study they said two basic neurotransmitters, namely the dopamine and then serotonin. So whenever there is a defect because of genetics, so they also try to identify some kind of manifestations in the form of violent individuals who so excessive compulsive behavior was exhibited by these people. So this is about neurotransmitters. And when it comes to hormones, we know that pancreas secretes and then liver secretes lot of substances, secretions, some digestive juices and all. But then hormones, they are a little different from this. So they are produced by endocrine glands. They are called endocrine gland products. Now the difference between the other organs and then endocrine glands is that their secretions don't require any duct. That means endocrines are ductless glands. They are ductless glands. That means they don't have a tube so that the secretion directly goes into that. Through the alimentary canal it functions. It's not like that. Endocrine glands, they don't have ducts, and whatever secretions they are producing, they directly mix with the blood and all. So that is the beauty of hormones. Now human behavior, whether there is any effect or relationship between aggressive behavior or criminal behavior vis-a-vis the hormone. So very interestingly, criminologists try to establish this kind of a correlation. Now they said physiological and then psychological effects of endocrine secretions, whether that is there or not. What is the effect? Whether they have some effect on the physiological functioning or the psychological behavior of the human beings whenever this behavior of aggressiveness or criminal behavior is there. Can that be related to the hormones that are present? Whether there is a low level of hormone reported in such people, or is there exorbitant, excessive amount of hormone that is being getting secreted and all. They try to observe that. And then what they said is the they attributed, in fact, testosterone is one such hormone which is responsible for secondary sexual characters that appear in male, that is beard, mustaches, hair and all. These are secondary sexual characters. So they are exclusive for this testosterone because of a hormone called testosterone. So males exhibit this kind of a secondary sexual characteristics. So likewise in females there is a monthly menstrual cycle that happens, and then before this menstrual cycle there are a lot of changes that happen during ovulation and all. Lot of changes happen in the female body. So they are also on account of the hormones. Now behavioral measures, if you try to take, and especially females, what they observed is, biological changes after ovulation have been linked to irritability and then aggression. So not only on males and females, also they try to examine and then try to establish the effect of the hormones on the human behavior, especially aggressive behavior and criminal behavior. When they try to do that, what they found is, at least in females, whatever biological changes that they are observing internally after ovulation, that means after the just commencement of the completion of the menstrual cycle, what they found is, that is related to, some aggression and then some irritability. So these are all being observed because there is some excessive amount of these hormones, pre-menstrual cycle hormones. Because of that, some people, at least majority of them, observed that irritability factor and aggression was there in these kind of females. And then only a small percentage of females are susceptible to cyclical hormones changes, because not all females have this kind of irritability or aggression associated with the menstrual cycle. But then quite a significant percentage of people were found to exhibit, because since only out of population, if you think, though they represent very small percentage, but then significant enough. They are significant enough to show that these people, they are very, very susceptible to cyclical changes, and because of some hormonal imbalances. So we see that they exhibit this increased hostility and then that kind of a behavior they were exhibiting. And they also have shown the rise in testosterone and all, because only a portion of the females are very sensitive to these hormones. So the two hormones that are responsible in male and to some extent a significant percentage of the females is the testosterone in case of males, and it is the hormones that get secreted during the premenstrual cycle, especially after the ovulation. So some people, some significant portion of the females were shown to exhibit this kind of a behavior, and whatever aggression or whatever criminal behavior that was attributed to the hormonal change. So neurotransmitters on one hand are chemical messengers, we can say, and hormones are secretions of what you call the ductless glands or the endocrine glands, and they also have some correlation with regard to the criminal behavior or antisocial behavior. Now coming to the autonomic nervous system. So it is but quite common in people, in human beings, that whenever we face a situation which we never anticipate and which is very sudden and immediate, so system has got adaptability. So people are of two kinds. Some people are very bold. They try to face the situation. They stand by this. They stand out and then they face the situation with all that boldness. So that is fight. They fight out the situation. But some sect of people are those who have no courage to fight the situation. Rather, they go into a mode called flight mode. So in flight mode, they try to look out for ways and means where they can flee away from the situation. So this is called flight or flight situation. Fight or flight. Fight means fight out the युद्ध करो और जीतो. Flight is run away from the situation. Bhago, situation se bhago. So these are the two systems the human being tries to adopt, so that any emergency situation, what do? Any emergency situation, if it arises, we try to hoard things. We try to collect things and then pile them up so that they हमको जरूरत काम आएगा, कभी जरूरी पड़े तो काम आएगा. So that is the tendency humans have. So also the human body internalize that concept, and then it says, if my sugar levels are going down, let me hoard sugar, let me draw it from the organ, and so that my sugar level is maintained, isn't it? So I try to balance. I mean, there is what is known as a homeostasis, a balance or equilibrium that body always tries to maintain. Now, there are two systems in the body, nervous system, sympathetic and then parasympathetic. So these two systems balance each other. Sympathetic, parasympathetic systems, they try to balance each other. So when these two systems are balancing each other, the body is going to attain a state called equilibrium, homeostasis. The body is said to acquire a status called the homeostasis. Now, in certain situations, as I said, crisis. So suddenly you are facing a very serious situation which you never anticipated. It comes to you all of a sudden. So what your body is going to do? So it is making you to prepare to efficiently handle that particular situation. So body tries to prepare. Situation tries to prepare the body for these eventualities. Now in the process, whatever sugar that is there in the body, it has to be properly metabolized, isn't it? So metabolism of the sugar, because it requires body in order to fight out a situation which is very adverse, which is crisis to us. So we have to fight out. For fighting we require more energy, isn't it? For fighting we require more energy. So we have to fight out that, and then for fighting we require more energy. So more energy, where is it coming from to the body? It is coming through the sugar. Now once sugar is there in the blood, it has to be metabolized. Only then the energy will be released, isn't it? So for that there has to be pumping of blood, there has to be heartbeat, more metabolism, isn't it? So accordingly you will see that whenever body prepares you for such a situation, your heartbeat increases, your breathing increases, your pulse rate goes up, your BP goes up, isn't it? So this is a mechanism adopted by the body to fight out the situation, isn't it? This is precisely what we try to do in any polygraph test. So recently we have been getting updates, lot of updates from the media, that for 100 people they have interrogated, and for more than dozen people they have conducted the polygraph twice, thrice, and then what they precisely try to do is, the questions which are related to and questions which are not related to the crime, isn't it? They try to prepare a kind of a question bank or a questionnaire, and depending upon the seriousness of the case, they try to have those many sittings. For example, a case which warrants, let us say, a sitting of 5 phases. Now, what do they do? In any given sitting, that is called a chart. Any given sitting, they cannot be more than 10 questions. So, depending upon how serious is the case, those many sittings will be there, those many charts will be there. So, poly means many, graphy means a kind of a picture. So, they try to monitor all bodily activities. They are in response. These reactions are in response to an external stimuli. So what is that external stimuli that we are trying to provide? The external stimuli is in the form of a question. The external stimuli that we try to give to the person who intends to undergo the polygraph, we try to give him the question. So suppose if it were to be a normal question, there is no need for the person undergoing the test to tell lie, isn't it? If suppose the first question which I ask is your name so and so XYZ, so I don't find any reason why the person undergoing the polygraph test should say no for that or say yes or no. Even if he says yes or no also, the body reaction also need not be in an opposite direction. See, for example, the second question which is relevant, let us say to the case, if I say, you are there, for example, Ghosh, Dr. Ghosh, if suppose he is put this kind of a question on that particular night, where were you? Where were you? If suppose I say this question, or were you there in your chamber? If suppose I put that question. If in fact, if that fellow was there in his chamber, then if he says yes or if he says no, there are two options. Suppose if he says yes, then he is admitting his guilt. Suppose he says no. Suppose he says no. But then the fact remained that he is there. So there is a conflict. If he is a hardcore criminal, things are different. But if he is a first timer, and even if he was a criminal, he was never caught. His misdeeds were never known to the universe. Now, for the first time when he is undergoing a polygraph test, and then maybe he doesn't have that much knowledge about the test, or maybe he has not mastered the technique of fooling the polygraph. So, with that intention, if he is appearing for the test, whatever question that is put to him, if that is going to bring in some kind of a guilty in him, so definitely he is going to react, and then that gets reflected, because there are a lot of attachments that go on. Before the questioning starts, there are a lot of accessory instruments along which are there in the polygraph, which get attached to the body of the person. Now, to monitor blood pressure, to monitor his heartbeat and all, there are and then skin resistance and all, because sweat glands also secrete lot of sweat. So all these attachments will be there, and then they will allow the person to acclimatize to the machine in the initial stage, and once they feel he is acclimatized, then they start putting the questions that is both relevant and then irrelevant. So for each question, that is the external stimuli, you see a kind of a response. There is a change in heartbeat, change in pulse rate, all these, because there are body attachments, they get reflected in the graph. So finally, when the sitting gets completed, when the phase gets completed, then there are evidences that you have asked these many questions, and for each question, this is the kind of response that the person is generating, isn't it? Now, it is final interpretation of polygraph always will be done by the expert only. So he knows what are the questions which are being put to the person and what kind of responses that the person, the subject is generating, that also you will monitor, and then from the graph you will decipher the fact that for a particular question, was the subject deviating, or was the subject telling the truth, or was he trying to misread the person. So these kind of manifestations can be monitored, because after all, our behaviors are being controlled by, I told you that there is a nervous system, both sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic system is the one which takes over the body whenever body faces a situation called emergency situation, or whenever there is a crisis, or whenever there is an excessive exertion, physical exertion by the body, then also you will see that these systems lose their balance. That means homeostasis is no more there, and then the body system is taken over completely by the sympathetic nervous system. So once the body sympathetic system takes over, many physiological changes are going to happen inside the body, and there is a machine which can monitor these kind of manifestations which are happening in the body, and then these responses are generated by putting a person who has got that guilty mind, and then whenever such questions which can stimulate, which can generate guilt in the person, these physiological changes are going to happen, and they can be monitored. There are attachments to the body, this can be monitored, and from the graph that you get at the end of the test, the interpretation will be done by the forensic psychologist, and then he will come to know to what question, what is the response, what is the question put, and what is the response that is being given. So with that they will interpret it, and because it's not the only sitting they will be making for a serious case like the one for a doctor, maybe a lot of sittings have to happen, because you need to know. And one more thing what they try to do is, before actual commencement of the test, there is what is called as a pre-interview test. So in that test, so to formulate the questions, what kind of questions should be put to this man. So for that they need to understand the psyche of that person, psychology of that person. What is the temperament? Is he an aggressive person, or is he a timid man, or is he a meek personality, or a soft personality, or introvert, extrovert? So all the parameters which will decide the behavior of that person, they thoroughly understand. And then once they know the psyche of the person, then they will be preparing the questionnaire, they will discuss the matters with the investigating officers, and what angle in the investigation they want to verify through polygraph, that also they'll discuss. And after doing all that, the subject will be ready. And one more precaution what they need to do is that on that day when they intend to do the polygraph, they have to ensure that the person is not diabetic, or he doesn't have excess sweating, that he is also, his BP is normal, and also his if he is a heart patient, I mean, is there any further complication? Because these systems are going to be elevated, isn't it? For that reason, it is always good practice that they should get the person checked up by a family doctor, if he is going to a family doctor, and ensure a fitness certificate from him. And of course legal consent is also required, because this is against his will, and then it is intrusion into his body, and also a lot of legal formalities also have to be, court permission has to be obtained, his own consent has to be obtained, it has to be obtained. And with all that formalities, they try to arrange for a day, and then get the permission from the court, arrange for the day, and then depending upon the case, so many sittings will be there, and ultimately they'll analyze and then come to conclusion whether there is a guilt on the part of the person or otherwise. This will be verified, and accordingly they'll be submitting. And it's, I mean, you cannot, for the entire case you cannot run the polygraph, only a particular angle, particular aspect of the crime polygraph can be done. And there are people who can also outbid people who are experts in hypnotizing themselves, people who are who have mastered yoga, and who can control their brain very well, and all. They can very well defeat the polygraph, and people who are otherwise saints and all, who by practicing yoga can control their emotions, can control their heartbeat and all. And there are also people who polygraph doesn't work for them. And there are yet extreme people, pathological liars, like these two people, Roy and then Ghosh. So they are pathological liars, because their job is given a chance want to lie. So such people also can defeat, I feel. So defeat the polygraph. So because they don't have that, the person should have that guilty mind, his conscience should prick. Only then, you will respond greatly to the polygraph. Otherwise, people who are stubborn, who are, pathological liars, and who are, third-rate criminals and all, for them, polygraph, I don't think will work. So this is about what you call the nervous system, autonomous nervous system, and I told you parasympathetic is also there. But this crisis situation for any human beings will not last for long. It doesn't extend for a very long time. And once that situation goes away, when the crisis goes away, body again will, the parasympathetic system takes over, and then a balance again is established, which is called, I told you, as homeostasis. I hope this neurotransmitters, hormones, and then autonomous nervous system is quite clear to all of you. Then moving on to the psychoanalytical theories of crime. Very, very interesting thing that Sigmund Freud is almost, we can tell him as the father of psychoanalytical theory of crime. And then he says all human behaviors, whether conscious or unconscious, they're all controlled by desires, emotions, wantings, needs, and all. I mean, we have been controlled by these kind of emotions. That's what he says. Now, what he propounds is, now there is a conscious and unconscious two compartments in any human being. Now, he says a conscious is, that is biologically, it is almost constant in every, it is common for everybody. And then he gives a name to it as Id, ID, Id. Then what is this Id? This is the reservoir of all our desires, urges, and impulses, whatever we have inside. They are all being governed by Id. So that is, it is a reservoir of both biological and psychological factors, isn't it? So this is going to decide the behavior, underlying whatever behavior we try to exhibit. This is all because of this Id. That's what he proposes. Now, there is unconscious element also, compartment also, that exists in us, and then he gives two different names for that. That is, super ego, ego, and then these are the names he gives. And super ego, he says, is a force of self-criticism. So you have a self-critic also inside. So that is given a name as super ego. Now, what does it say? It stems from the individuals because of their social experience. So society has given us some constraints, some restraints, some things which we are prohibited to do, some things which got approvals and all. So that kind of social experience is vested in all individuals, and the superego is responsible for all that. So it is a self-critic. So whatever desires which are uncontrolled that we have inside, represented by it, always there is a balance. The superego always tries to correct us. It will criticize us. This is not socially approved. Even though I have a desire to steal somebody's nice purse, I have an intention, I have a desire. Id is prompting me. See, this bag is nice. Why don't you steal it? You don't have it. You need not buy. You steal it. So that is the inside urge I have. But then my critic, self-critic, which I have got in the form of a superego, says, no, stealing is prohibited. It is unlawful. If I am so much interested, I can ask her if she can give, or she can buy another kind of a purse like that and can give it to me on a price. So this is a self-critic which I have got inside me, which is also unconscious. So what it says is socially approved things, things which are not approved. So it tries to discriminate between the two, and then tries to control my desire, inner urge or desire, and then put me in that balance. Put up that balanced behavior which is expected of an individual. So superego acts that way. Now, ego is another middle one, a mediator kind of a thing, which tries to balance these two. Id and superego, these two are getting balanced by my ego. Whatever external action I do out of the balance of these two, that is called the ego. So this is conscious. Ego is conscious, whereas the other two, namely the superego and id, are the two unconscious components of my behavior. So this is how he tries to redefine again conscious, what is conscious and what is unconscious. So it is a kind of a desire. Each one of us has got lot of desires. We have got lot of urges, drives, and then impulses. So all these are inside, and there is a mechanism to control these desires, because some desires or some impulses are not they are not getting the approval by the society, isn't it? We don't have an approval by the society, so they need to be suppressed. Such ideas or such desires or such needs need to be suppressed, isn't it? So for suppressing my own desires, I need to have a self-critic inside me. So that self-criticism part is being played by the superego. It tells me all morals, it tells me the ethics, it tells me that what is good and what is bad, what I am not supposed to do, what I am supposed to do, all these piece of good advices. So they will this is being controlled by my super ego. Now superego and ego, there has to be balance. So if I have too many urges and if I don't have a control over it, so I may be tempted to take away the valuable item from a person who is the real owner. I am not the owner. So only way where I can possess that item is only by stealing, by robbing that from the real owner. So this kind of a balance of behavior will be there only when there is a balance of our id and super ego by the mediator called the ego. Now superego, as I told you, it is a force of self-criticism, and it stems from individual's social experience in a particular cultural milieu. So a cultural milieu or the socially accepted kind of a culture, there are certain things which get approvals and which do not get, or which are disapproved by the society. So it is trying to judge, or it is going to be judged between, what to do and what not to do, which one is good, which one is bad. This kind of a discrimination I am getting by virtue of a superego which is there, which is acting as a self-critic for me. Now, so that means what? It is trying to give you all kinds of morals, ethics, codes and all. But then what does my unconscious thing says? Because superego also operates on unconscious level. It operates at the unconscious level. So what are my childhood experiences with my parents? That child experiences them as judgmental, and then internalize these values. Whenever we say don't do this, please do that, so all these kinds of morals and then ethics it tries to imbibe, and then it tries to internalize all these values, and that builds up a very good superego. A balanced kind of a superego can develop in a child because of its experiences, because it is being told what is good and what is bad by the parents. So all that will become judgmental, and the child is going to internalize these values in itself, and so his conscious personality accordingly will develop by what is called ego, and it is oriented towards real world. Ego is, it is conscious, and it has got the connection with the real world in which the person lives. So it is acting as a mediator. So between what? Between the demands of Eid, because Eid always is pleasure, because by nature we have studied human beings are hedonistic. That means they are pleasure seeking. Nobody wants pain. They want to avoid pain. So because of that inbuilt nature of the human beings to be a hedonistic, so we want our pleasure to prevail. So when will our pleasure prevail? Only when our desires are fulfilled, isn't it? When our needs are fulfilled, when my impulses are fulfilled, that gives me a lot of pleasure, isn't it? But it doesn't mean that whatever desire I have, that should be fulfilled by legal means only. It has to be fulfilled by legal means only. So not always that I'll be able to fulfill my needs by legal means. But then still I have an urge that has to be satisfied. isn't it? So my urge, when it is not satisfied, I'll be put into a situation where I develop some kind of a stress, or where I get some kind of a strain, isn't it? So for that reason, there has to be inbuilt criticism. Self-critic also has to be there. So superego is playing that role of a self-critic. Now, we said the child experiences, these things in its life, and then it internalizes the good values, and then when the parentage is good, they get good values. When it is when they are not giving good things or good values, then it will adopt the bad values, and then his behavior will accordingly change. Now, that is the reason why we said ego is acting as a mediator, or rather it balances between the demands of id and then the prohibitions of the superego. So why we call that as prohibiting? So it doesn't allow certain acts to be done. In the process of fulfilling our desire, we may do certain acts which do not have any approval by the society. So it is going to list out all those activities which do not have the social approval. So that means it is prohibiting certain acts, so that our urge, whatever it is there, though it is a urge inside, I am still able to suppress that, because I know that the repercussions of my, in the process of fulfilling that desire, the consequence is that I am becoming antisocial. So if that is the behavior, then superego comes in between, and it tries to tell us that this is not moral, this is not ethics on your part, don't do this. So it is acting as a self-critic for us. So this is what we mean by the dividing. The entire behavior is being controlled by this conscious and unconscious of self. And then we try to give, Sigmund Freud is trying to give different names for that. He says id, with his reservoir of a lot of drives, and then that gets operated unconsciously. And then he says apart from id, we also have a superego inside, which also functions under the unconscious level. And then he says ego is one thing which connects us to the real world. So whatever action that we do, that gets reflected there. So that means he tries to say that a mediator kind of a function ego has got, and then it tries to balance the demands of the id and then the prohibited behavior that one should not exhibit, because I have got a superego also subconsciously or unconsciously working underline. So this is how a balance is being maintained. So it handles conflicts between superego and then id. The ego acts as a mediator. It also tries to handle the conflicts. So individual experiences are there, all sides of drives from id, urges are there. Now, when these are not fulfilled, he feels guilty. Guilty because superego. Why am not, when my desire is not getting fulfilled, naturally it frustrates me. And then it makes me feel guilty at the same time. Why? Because superego is there, my own self-criticism is there not to do that, but then my urges are not getting fulfilled, my desires are not getting fulfilled, isn't it? So there are 2-3 situations. Suppose in sublimation, what happens? In sublimations, what happens? Drives of id, that means the desire that I want to do a particular thing, or the impulse that I wanted to fulfill my want and all, so that gets diverted. So in a situation called sublimation, all the drives which are there as a part of id, so they get diverted to approved activity by superego. So please try to understand, sublimation is a situation where whatever drives that are there, whatever impulses that are there, whatever urge that I have got inside because of id, that is getting diverted. So id diverts this by an activity which is approved by the superego to approved activity by the superego. So that is what we do in sublimation. And the aggressive destructive urges, for example, if they are there, they get diverted to athletic activities. See, if I have to use all my energy, if I have to kick somebody, let us say, my urge is that I am not happy with somebody. I have an urge inside, Eid inside, that I have to kick somehow some person. So this kind of activity or this kind of energy I can divert if I keep my energies towards athletics. I can improve my body, isn't it? So this is a kind of diverting my desires of Eid into some kind of an approved act. Athletics is approved activity, approved by society. So super ego is playing a role of a critic in me, and then whatever aggressive behavior I have got inside, whatever destructive urges I have got inside by way of Eid, I am diverting them. I am diverting my energies because of that aggression towards playing or uh, uh, towards adopting an athletics, so that my energy is diverted that way. So that helps my body. I can build up a very good body by doing athletics. So all such negative urges, negative things like aggression, destruction, these urges can be diverted. So this job of diverting the negative energies into a positive kind of an energy, that kind of a job is being undertaken by super ego when there is a situation called the sublimation. And there is another situation called repression. When we try to suppress repression drives are stuffed back into unconscious. Individual denies that they exist. So best way is we ignore. Drives are pushed back, stuffed back again into unconscious, isn't it? So result is reaction formation. There is a reaction formation, that is repressed sexual desire. That is, example is repressed sexual desire becomes prudish about all matters. So people become prudish in all matters, about that matter. So there can be sublimation situation, there can be repression. And yet another kind of a situation can be there, a projection. What do we mean by projection? Persons with repressed homosexual urges see homosexual trends in others also, because their feelings are thrown back into unconscious. So whenever I see other person, even if they are normal people also, I try to identify, I tend to identify only such characters in the other persons. So this is a kind of a projection. I try to project myself in another personality. That is called projection. So there are three different ways in which I try to look at my own conscious. One is sublimation, the other one is the repression, yet third thing situation is projection. So these three situations I'll try to whether I divert the negative feeling, or whether the negative feelings are suppressed, or whether negative feelings, with my negative feelings I am trying to project somebody as my own self. These are the three ways. Now, experience of early childhood, these are very, very important. These are very important. So basic drives, whatever we have, basic drives, there are different stages. That is, these orientation will be initially oral drives, then comes the anal drives, then come the genital drives. So whatever experience that we have in the childhood, there are different basic drives. So they can be classified again. So oral drives, anal drives, and then genital drives. So again, we also know the Oedipus complex, Electra complex and all. This is quite common. The girl child always, it gets attracted to the father, and then a boy gets attracted to the mother. Opposite sex of the parents and all, they get attached to the opposite sex. This is called the Oedipus and then Electra complex. So if guilt produced at this stage are not handled properly by ego, so whatever that is guilt produced during these drives, whether it be oral drive or anal drive or genital drive, so if a particular guilt is produced at this particular stage, at any stage, any of these three stages, and suppose you are not able to handle this guilt produced properly, because we have a ego inside. So if ego doesn't maintain this kind of a handling process, then it leaves a lasting imprint on the personality. So this gets reflected even the boy grows up, becomes an adult and all. This particular longing impression, a lasting impression in the mind of the person, which he acquired during his childhood, because these urges were not properly maintained, and that produced a lot of guilt in him. So this gets carried forward, and even in when he becomes adult also, he is not able to manage this kind of a personality. So that's what Sigmund Freud says, experience of childhood are very, very important. Now, the if the guilt produced at this stage is not handled properly by ego, what becomes? It leaves a impacting, lasting impression on the personality of the person. So there is what is known as a transference that happens. This is a kind of a tool, to deal with the past significant relationships, and replaced by using the current significant relationship. So let us say that I have got a very bad experience, past experience with my parents. So what I'll try to do is that strained relationship, spoiled relationship, otherwise a negative kind of a relationship, that can be mitigated by undergoing a psychological counseling. So how does the person who is doing the therapy, what kind of method he has to adopt? So he takes the role of a parent now. So the current relationship what he has got with the patient, he is trying to slowly counsel him, and then in such a way that because of this current relationship that exists between the patient and doctor, slowly he will try to reflect, he will try to ruminate whatever past negative experiences are there. So that gets slowly replaced by the new relationship. So what is the new relationship now? The relationship between the counselor and then counselee. So that is called transference. No, this is transference is a kind of a tool to deal with the past significant relationship, and now because of the current relation, slowly it starts developing, and then it becomes positive. Once this positive kind of a relationship gets established, that slowly replaces now the past negative experience which you have experienced in your childhood because of a bad parentage, or maybe because of an aggressive parentage and all, that gets slowly replaced. This is called a kind of a tool which the therapists try to use, called transference kind of a therapy. So example is, suppose if a patient's problem stems from an early traumatic relationship with a parent, similar with the analyst. Now treatment involves that straightening out the current relationship. You straighten out the current relationship, that is a relationship that is existing between the patient and the doctor. Now slowly, if this particular relationship ends in a positive note, positive kind of a feeling, now the old emotion, negative emotion which he had during his childhood time with his parents or with one of his parents, now gets replaced by the current relationship that is now existing between the patient, and that's what precisely happen in any counseling. Now in this particular treatment, psychological treatment, what is happening, it is the feeling is straightened out. Whatever aberration that is there, that gets straightened out, and then that gets replaced by the current relationship, wiping out the past negative relationship which otherwise he had during his childhood. This is the psychoanalytical kind of a treatment that can be given whenever a person experiences this kind of a negative feeling during his childhood. So what is the psychoanalytical explanation that we can attribute when we talk of criminal behavior? Now, criminal behavior or delinquent behavior, what we can understand is there is a kind of disturbance or malfunctioning in the ego and superego, because when they balance each other, because we have id, we have superego inside working at the unconscious level, and id, the ego working at the conscious level. Now if there is a mismatch, if they are not functioning as desired, as per the norms, if they are not functioning, what will happen? There is a disturbance, there is a malfunctioning. So that gets reflected in the criminal or delinquent behavior, is what is the extrapolation that we can do whenever we talk of criminal behavior. Now id is constant almost, because all of us being human beings, we have similar kind of desires, we have emotions, we have desires, we have needs, we have impulses. It is but common, biologically they are there, inherent in everybody's brain. So id most of the time remains constant. Now some individuals perform criminal acts. Why? They possessed an overdeveloped superego. So why out of so many people only a particular sect of people are indulging in criminal activity? So from the ego, superego, the point of view, if we try to understand, these are the people who adopt the criminal activity, are the people where he found that there is a overdevelopment of the superego. Too many morals, it is trying to be always prohibitive, because superego by nature, by definition, is prohibiting in nature, working at the unconscious level. So a feeling of guilt is being generated, isn't it? I have an urge, I am not able to fulfill that because superego is too much developed, overdeveloped in me. So that leads to me a constant feeling of guilt, and then whenever guilt is there, anxiety is there. Now, what do I do? To remove and then balance between good and evil, this is working constantly. Superego is constantly working. So I can remove this by a kind of a punishment. I feel punishment is the only cleansing factor to remove the guilt. So I adopt the punishment. So unconsciously motivated errors, they are there. That is careless or imprudent ways of committing crime. So if I am little careless in committing crime, so thereby leave lot of clues in the scene, and there is an authority executive who can readily apprehend me and then convict me, and then my guilt is reduced, because this is a cleansing mechanism. By undergoing some punishment, I am cleansing myself. Punishment is acting as a cleansing agent for me. So this is one way of thinking. Now, psychoanalytical process also uncover the unconscious source of guilt, and then free the person from compulsive need for the punishment. Now, excess guilt from overdeveloped superego is the source of criminal behavior that we have understood. And there are people always, the delinquents, juvenile delinquents, when they were observed, they found to have this superego underdeveloped. So we have seen a case where superego is overdeveloped. So delinquent behavior also can originate from the underdeveloped superego. How? Where the delinquent behavior or criminal liability. If the id is not regulated properly, if id is not regulated, if the desires are not be properly regulated, then this kind of underdeveloped super ego is coming, because morals and all I don't give a lot of importance, because my super ego is all, it's not all that developed, isn't it? So when will this expression comes out, the unregulated ego, how can you know it physically? Because these are the people, delinquent children, whose parents, most of them in their childhood, they have only one parent, single parent, or completely parents are absent, and then they are not loving people, unloving parents rather. And if this is the situation in which the child grows up, definitely her experiences are bad, isn't it? and then it craves for, because that particular lovingness is not available to her, because the parents are either absent or they are non-loving. So if that is the thing, then they will cultivate only thing. Love attachment is completely missing in them. So there is no proper super ego formation. There is underdeveloped super ego formation. So that is probably responsible for this kind of a behavior. So like that, it is after all the interplay between the superego, ego, and then the id. So that shapes out our character, whether we are going to be conformists, whether we stick to the social norms that are given to us, or are we going to yield and become a part of non-conformists, or rather anti-social behavior. So the kind of behavior that somebody possesses is squarely governed by the conscious and the unconscious mind of the person, and this is precisely what is known as the psychoanalytical theory about criminology. Then he says that some kind of antisocial or criminal behaviors have a overdeveloped superego, and then some people have this underdeveloped. Because underdeveloped we can understand, because love and affection what a child is supposed to get during her childhood or his childhood is completely wanting, because either in their case the parents are absent, they are dead and gone, maybe they have left, or the child has left the parents, or maybe the love and affection what he is supposed to get is not getting at that level. So he has got an underdeveloped superego, because he was not getting love and affection. So he is also equally, he's morose, he doesn't believe in any attachment. So that may pave a way for him to go towards the to group himself with the antisocials, and then ultimately he may become an antisocial and unwanted behavior, not approved by the society. So like that, the interplay, as I said, between superego and ego, the interplay of all these things are going to shape our character, and how we can strike a balance between these things will ultimately make a person a good person or a bad person. This is what is all about the psychoanalytical theory propounded by Sigmund Freud, and then he is also a great criminologist who try to analyze the behavior by way of conscious and unconscious behaviors. I think for today that's all from my side. Probably the remaining theories of criminology, sociological, social order, conflict theory, containment theory, there are a lot of many theories. We'll stick to only two or three, and we try to complete that chapter and move on to the other topics that are there in Unit 1, because we are supposed to complete the Unit 1 before we end up our TA1. But anyway, because we have started little late, doesn't matter. Understanding the concept is more important rather than getting marks or completing the syllabus. And also at the same time, without compromising for syllabus and all, we try to complete that. But my only request to all of you is, most of you are coming online at the fag end of the session, so it is only for the sake of attendance if you are coming. And if you have not understood the concept, it's of no use, isn't it? So all the more it is online, and then you are at a very disadvantaged position, that one-to-one contact is not happening. I don't know really how much of what I am teaching is going to reach you. But despite all that, lot of issues of connectivity and all, I do understand. But then coming at the very last minute to fag end of the lecture will not take you anywhere. I mean, it doesn't take you anywhere. So my request would be that you have to join at least 5 minutes before, so that whatever issues that you have with the connectivity, you can go for plan A, plan B, make lot of alternative arrangements. Otherwise, it will be difficult, especially abstract subjects like this. It will be very difficult to understand if you are not there from the beginning. But anyway, I don't believe in giving so much preaching every day. I am also getting tired telling these things repeatedly again and again. But hope you will not do this again, because it will be difficult. I have to keep two systems, one only to admit you, the other one to give lecture. So all my resources also are getting depleted. So please understand this, and then next class I expect everybody to be on time. So for today we'll leave the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah, excuse me.
Thank you.
నా ప్రమాణం
ఇంకా కాన్ఫరెన్స్